The corridors of the Ethelgard Interstellar Command Academy were a testament to galactic unity, a gleaming fusion of 100 different architectures for 100 different species. Crystalline archways built by the Glyptons resonated with soft, harmonic light, while the floor plates, forged by the volcanic Cathar, were textured for the grip of four-legged and two-legged alike. The air itself was a carefully managed cocktail of 16 different atmospheric compositions, a minor miracle of environmental engineering that still left Leo Vance with a perpetually dry throat. He was the sole representative of his species, the first human ever admitted to Ethelgard, and every breath he took felt like a borrowed one. As he walked toward the combat simulation chamber, a massive form eclipsed the harmonic light. Xylos, a Cathar cadet built like a siege engine, blocked his path. 4 powerful, scaly arms were crossed over a chest plated with natural bone armor. His reptilian eyes, slitted and golden, narrowed with casual contempt. "The soft skin," Xylos rumbled, his voice a gravelly vibration that Leo felt in his teeth. Still trying to keep up, 2 of his companions, smaller skitterkin with chittering mandibles, snickered behind him. Leo met his gaze without flinching. He had learned early on that showing fear was like bleeding in predator-filled waters. "Just heading to class, Xylos, same as you." Xylos took a deliberate step forward, forcing Leo to step back. The Cathar was nearly twice Leo's height and several times his mass. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world locked in a permanent state of brutal geological upheaval. They were born warriors. Humans, by comparison, were fragile, squishy things. "You do not belong here," Xylos said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "Ethelgard is for the strong, for the future commanders of the Galactic Compact. Your presence is an insult to those who have earned their place." "My entrance scores said otherwise," Leo replied, his tone even. It was the only defense he had. He couldn't win a physical confrontation, so he clung to the logic of his admission. He was a political anomaly, an olive branch extended to a species the galaxy had cordoned off for centuries. From a nearby alcove, another voice, smooth and precise as cut glass, joined the conversation. His scores were an anomaly, a statistical deviation in pattern recognition, a parlor trick. It is not true strategic intellect. Lumina, a Glypton, drifted into the corridor. Her crystalline form refracted the light into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Glyptons were beings of pure intellect, their thought processes running on quantum calculations that could model 1,000 battlefield variables in the time it took Leo to blink. They perceived lesser species as little more than noisy, organic static. "A primate's cleverness is not a commander's wisdom," she resonated. Her species didn't have a mouth. Her words were a direct teleempathic projection, layered with an unshakable sense of superiority. Leo said nothing. There was nothing to say. Arguing with Xylos was pointless, and debating Lumina was like trying to convince a supercomputer it had made a rounding error. He was the ghost at the feast, a walking curiosity that served only to unify the other, more significant species in their shared disdain. He had spent 3 years at this academy, enduring the casual shoves in zero-gravity training, the condescending remarks in astrogation class, the complete social isolation in the communal mess hall. He ate alone, studied alone, and in the quiet of his habitation unit, he pored over every military text he could access, from the elegant, flowing strategies of the avians to the brutal attrition doctrines of the Cathar. He studied them all, but most of all, he studied the censored, fragmented archives of his own people. Xylos finally grunted and shoved past him, his armored shoulder sending Leo stumbling against the wall. The skitterkin chittered again and followed in their leader's wake. Lumina drifted by without a glance, her crystalline form leaving a faint, ozone scent in the air. Leo straightened his uniform, a simple gray tunic that felt paper-thin compared to the exoskeletons and natural armor of his classmates. He looked down at his hands. Soft skin, blunt nails, no claws, no integrated bioweapons. By every galactic standard, he was utterly defenseless. He took a slow breath, the recycled air tasting of metal and alien pheromones, and continued on his way. The final exam was in 1 week. The Crucible, a comprehensive, full-scale war simulation that would determine the rank and posting of every graduating cadet. To everyone else, it was the culmination of their training. To Leo, it was the only test that mattered. The briefing hall for the Crucible was cavernous, its ceiling a swirling star chart of the known galaxy. The 75 cadets of the graduating class stood in loose formations according to species, a living tapestry of the Galactic Compact's military might. Leo stood apart, a solitary island in a sea of scales, chitin, and shimmering energy. Instructor Kalen, a centuries-old Cygnian whose frail-looking body belied a mind of immense experience, stood before the main holographic display. His voice was soft, yet it carried to every corner of the hall. "Cadets," he began, his multifaceted eyes sweeping over the assembly. "For 3 years you have studied the art of war as practiced by the Compact, a tradition of honor, discipline, and managed conflict. You have learned the proper application of force, the sanctity of treaty, and the doctrines that have maintained peace for 1,000 cycles." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The Crucible will test none of that." A murmur rippled through the hall. Xylos shifted his massive weight, intrigued. Lumina's crystalline form glowed with a flicker of focused curiosity. "The scenario you will face is not a compact engagement," Kalen continued. "You will be pitted against an adversary that does not follow our rules of engagement. It is an adaptive, relentless, and unconventional AI modeled on a proscribed threat profile. It will not fight honorably. It will not accept surrender. Its sole objective is the total annihilation of your forces. You will be divided into squads of 3. Your mission is to survive and defend the designated sector for a cycle of 72 standard hours." The random squad assignments flashed onto the main display. A wave of groans, sighs, and muted exclamations filled the hall as cadets saw their teammates. Leo's eyes found his own name, VANCE-L, and next to it, XYLOSKLUMINAG. A dead silence fell over their small corner of the universe. Leo could feel dozens of eyes on him. It was the cruelest joke the Academy's algorithm could have played. The soft skin, the brute, and the brain. A team designed for catastrophic failure. Xylos turned his massive head slowly, his golden eyes locking onto Leo with an expression of pure disgust. "Unacceptable," he growled, loud enough for Kalen to hear. "I will not be anchored to this. Liability." Lumina projected a wave of cold indignation. "My processing efficiency will be compromised by accommodating for primitive tactical instincts. This pairing is statistically suboptimal." Instructor Kalen's gaze settled on them, his ancient eyes unreadable. "The assignments are final. War does not give you the luxury of choosing your allies. You will learn to work together or you will be the first to fall. Dismissed. Prepare for insertion." The simulation pod was a sterile white egg, humming with latent energy. As Leo settled into the neural interface chair, he could feel the contempt radiating from his 2 squad mates. Xylos practically had to fold his massive frame to fit inside the pod, his armored plates scraping against the hatch. Lumina had already interfaced, her physical form becoming still as her consciousness integrated with the simulation's tactical network. "Stay out of my way, human," Xylos grunted, his last words before the Neuralinks activated. "Let the warriors handle the fighting. And the strategists handle the thinking," Lumina added, a final, cutting thought directed at them both. Then the world dissolved into a wash of white light. They materialized on the command bridge of a virtual battlecruiser, the Aegis. Through the forward view screen, a nebula swirled in impossible colors. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, showing fleet dispositions, energy levels, and sensor readings of the sector they were assigned to defend. It was a resource-rich asteroid cluster surrounding a single, terraformed moon. Their fleet consisted of 12 ships, the battlecruiser, 3 heavy cruisers, 4 nimble destroyers, and 4 support frigates. "Fleet command defaults to me," Xylos declared immediately, his 4 hands already flying across a command console, his powerful fingers surprisingly deft. "My combat rating is the highest. Lumina, you will manage sensor analysis and predictive threat modeling. Human, you are on damage control and resource management. Do not touch anything related to strategy or weapons." Leo didn't argue. He knew it would be useless. He simply nodded and moved to the designated station, his eyes already scanning the resource readouts. He was being given the janitor's job, but the janitor sees everything everyone else throws away. Lumina's voice echoed in their shared neural comms, stripped of its usual condescension and sharpened to pure data. Primary threat vector analysis complete. The enemy AI will most likely advance through the Orion Spur, using the asteroid field for cover. A standard defensive formation, the Guardian's Shield, positioned at grid coordinates 7-4 Alpha, offers a 93.6% probability of successfully repelling an initial assault of predicted strength. Make it so, Xylos commanded. All ships form Guardian's Shield, power to forward shields, charge primary weapon systems. The virtual ships on the tactical display moved into a neat, textbook formation, a concave shield of warships ready to meet a frontal assault. It was a perfect by-the-book opening. Strong, predictable. Leo watched the display, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He cross-referenced the enemy's threat profile from the briefing with the sector's topography. The AI was described as unconventional. The Guardian's Shield formation was the most conventional defense in the Compact's entire playbook. "Commander Xylos," Leo said tentatively, his voice calm. "What is it, human?" Xylos snapped, not looking up from his command console. "The enemy profile says it's adaptive. This formation is the first one in every standard tactical manual. It's what they'll expect." "It is the optimal formation," Lumina interjected, her tone crisp. "The statistical probabilities are clear." "They're only clear if the enemy acts as we expect," Leo countered. "What if it doesn't? That asteroid field is dense. A smaller, faster force could use it as a screen, bypass our main line of engagement, and strike our support frigates from the flank. We're anchored here, a fixed target." Xylos finally turned, his face a mask of fury. "Are you questioning my command and the Glypton's calculations? You, who have never seen a real battle, your species has been caged for a reason. You know nothing of war. Now be silent and monitor your energy conduits." Leo fell silent. He had said his piece. He returned to his station, his fingers moving across the console, rerouting auxiliary power from non-essential systems to the engines and point defense cannons. He created a secondary power grid, a shadow system that wasn't standard operating procedure but might give them a few extra seconds of maneuverability if the worst happened. He did his job, and he waited. The attack did not come from the front. It started with a ghost, a single faint sensor reading at the extreme edge of the asteroid field. Lumina initially dismissed it as a sensor echo, a common anomaly. But then there was another and another. They were too small to be warships, barely larger than asteroids themselves. "Unidentified contacts," Lumina reported, a flicker of uncertainty in her projection. "They are using the asteroid field's gravimetric distortions to mask their signatures. Their energy output is negligible." "Probably scout drones," Xylos grunted, his eyes still fixed on the empty space in front of their shield wall. "Ignore them." "They're not acting like scouts," Leo said, his voice low. He pointed to his own display. "They're not scanning us. They're moving in a coordinated pattern, heading for the gaps in our formation, toward the rear." Before Xylos could issue another dismissive command, the trap was sprung. The small contacts weren't drones. They were kinetic impactors, massive, engine-strapped asteroids launched from deep within the field. With no energy signatures to track, they were nearly invisible until the last moment. At the same instant, the main enemy fleet burst from the nebula, not from the front, but from above, on a high-angle vector that completely bypassed the shield wall's optimal firing arcs. Alarms blared across the bridge. The Aegis shuddered as the first kinetic rounds slammed into the fleet. One of the destroyers, the Vigilant, was hit by 3 of the asteroids simultaneously. Its shields flared and died, its hull buckling like paper. The ship's icon on the tactical display turned a blood red before vanishing completely. "Flank attack! High-angle assault!" Xylos roared, his confidence shattering into rage. "All ships break formation. Engage targets of opportunity." It was the worst possible command. The disciplined shield wall dissolved into a chaotic melee. Ships fired on one another by mistake in the confusion. The enemy AI's fleet, a collection of lean, predatory vessels, sliced into them with terrifying precision. They ignored the heavy cruisers and the battle cruiser, focusing all their fire on the vulnerable support frigates and destroyers. "Our rear guard is collapsing," Lumina projected, her voice laced with the electronic equivalent of panic. "Shield failure on the Resolute, hull breach on the Stalwart. The probabilities they are collapsing." Another frigate exploded, its reactor core detonating in a silent, brilliant flash. In less than 10 minutes, they had lost a third of their fleet. Their score, displayed in the corner of the view screen, was plummeting into the negative. Xylos was frozen, overwhelmed by the sheer speed and ferocity of the assault. His textbook strategies were useless against an enemy that refused to play by the rules. "This is illogical," Lumina stated, her thought patterns fracturing. "Their tactics are insane. They are sacrificing their own lead ships to create openings. There is no honor, no structure." "They don't care about honor," Leo's voice cut through the chaos, steady and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "They only care about winning." Xylos and Lumina turned to him. The human, the soft skin, was standing calmly at his station. His eyes weren't on the terrifying spectacle outside, but on the tactical display where he was drawing a series of new vectors with his fingertips. "Commander," Leo said, his tone respectful but firm, leaving no room for argument. "We need to pull back. Now we have to cede this territory." "Cede territory?" Xylos bellowed. "Never. A Cathar does not retreat." "You will if you want to have a fleet left to command," Leo shot back. "Look, they're not trying to take the sector, not yet. They're trying to cripple us. They're herding us into a kill box against the moon's gravity well. If we stay and fight, we'll be annihilated in 20 minutes. Lumina's processors raced, analyzing Leo's projection. "The human is correct," she admitted, a note of shock in her voice. "The AI is creating a convergence of fire. The probability of fleet destruction if we maintain our current position is 99.8%. Xylos stared at the display, his pride warring with the undeniable truth of the disaster unfolding around him. His armored hide seemed to shrink. He had failed. His command had led them to ruin. "What do you suggest?" He finally ground out, the words tasting like ash. He wasn't speaking to Lumina, he was speaking to Leo. Leo's fingers flew across the console, his quiet observations over the past 3 years coalescing into a desperate, brilliant plan. "We don't just retreat. We run. We make them think we're broken. All remaining ships full power to engines. We head for the moon's atmospheric edge. Use the magnetic field to disrupt their targeting locks. We're going to hide." Hide? The concept was anathema to a Cathar. "They think like a predator," Leo explained, his voice low and intense. "A predator that's just wounded its prey. It will be overconfident, it will pursue, and when it does, we stop being the prey. We become the trap." Xylos hesitated for a bare second, then nodded, a sharp, jerky motion. The old way had failed. It was time for something new. "All ships," he commanded, his voice filled with a new, grim determination. "Follow the human's orders. Execute evasive maneuver, Vance 1." The remnants of their fleet broke off the disastrous engagement and fled. The enemy, as Leo predicted, gave chase. On the main view screen, the score continued to drop, a bleeding wound that showed they were losing ships, losing ground, losing the simulation. But for the first time since the battle began, Leo felt a sliver of something that wasn't despair. He felt the cold, familiar thrill of the hunt. He was no longer playing their game. He was making them play his. They hid the fleet in the upper ionosphere of the terraformed moon, using the turbulent magnetic storms as cover. It was a high-risk move. The storms put a strain on their own systems, but it rendered long-range sensors almost useless. For hours, they sat in silence, making only essential repairs. The enemy AI, denied its quick victory, began a systematic patrol grid of the moon's orbit. It was hunting them. On the bridge of the Aegis, the atmosphere had changed completely. Xylos was no longer barking orders. He stood by the tactical display, observing, his massive arms crossed. Lumina had ceased her constant probability calculations and was instead running micro-simulations of the unorthodox tactics Leo was proposing. The mockery was gone, replaced by a tense, focused silence. "It's taking the bait," Leo said quietly, pointing to the display. "It's splitting its forces. One group is sweeping the southern pole, the other is maintaining a high-orbit blockade. It assumes we're still thinking in terms of fleet engagement." A logical assumption based on our initial, catastrophic performance, Lumina added, a trace of what might have been Glipton embarrassment in her tone. Exactly, Leo said, a grim smile touching his lips. It thinks we're stupid. We're going to use that. Xylos, I need your 3 remaining heavy cruisers. I want them loud. They're going to break cover and make a run for the blockade. Draw the attention of the entire high-orbit fleet. Xylos's brow ridges furrowed. That's a suicide run. They'll be outnumbered 3-1. They're not supposed to win, Leo clarified. They're supposed to fight a losing battle convincingly. They need to sell the idea that our command structure is in chaos, and this is a desperate breakout attempt. While the orbital fleet is occupied, our destroyers, your battlecruiser, and I will be taking a different route. He traced a line on the map, a path that went down, deep into the moon's gravity well, skimming the surface through a series of deep, tectonic canyons. We use the terrain to mask our approach and come up behind the Southern Patrol Group. While they're moving to reinforce the battle in orbit, we hit their command ship from the rear. We decapitate their southern force. Lumina's crystalline form pulsed. The energy expenditure for that maneuver will be immense. The gravitational stress on the ship's hulls will be extreme. The entire plan relies on the AI reacting predictably to the cruiser's feint. It's an AI, Leo said. It follows logic. A crippled fleet making a desperate run for freedom is a logical, if foolish, move. It will react. It will consolidate its forces to crush the visible threat. It won't be looking for a knife in its back from a direction it believes is impossible. Xylos stared at the plan. It was insane. It was dishonorable. It involved feints, deception, and sacrificing ships as bait. It was everything compact military doctrine taught against. It was also brilliant. "Give the orders to the cruiser captains," Xylos said to the comms officer. "Inform them of their mission. Tell them to make it glorious." He looked at Leo. "Your plan, human, let us see if it works." The battle was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. The 3 heavy cruisers burst from the atmosphere with shields flaring, weapons blazing, a perfect picture of a desperate, ill-advised charge. The AI's orbital fleet, just as Leo predicted, converged on them like sharks to blood. Meanwhile, deep within the moon's canyons, the Aegis and its 2 escorting destroyers pushed their engines to the absolute limit. On the view screen, canyon walls of rock and ice flashed past at sickening speeds. The ship groaned under the gravitational strain, and Leo, at the damage control station, worked feverishly with his team to prevent a hull breach. "We're coming up on the exit point," the helm officer reported, his voice tight with stress. "The enemy's southern patrol is moving to intercept the cruisers," Lumina confirmed. "Their command ship is exposed." "Xylos," Leo said, his voice calm amidst the alarms. "It's time." The Cathar stepped up to the weapons console, his 4 hands moving with a purpose Leo had not seen before. This was not the blind fury of the first engagement. This was the focused application of violence. "All weapons," he roared, "target their command ship's engines and bridge. Fire at my mark." Their small strike force erupted from the canyon like a spear thrown from the planet's surface. They were behind the enemy patrol, perfectly positioned. For a fatal 3 seconds, the enemy ships didn't even register them as a threat. "Mark!" Xylos bellowed. A storm of plasma torpedoes and laser fire tore through the void. The enemy command ship, caught completely by surprise, was ravaged. Its engines detonated in a chain reaction, and its bridge section, the nerve center of the Southern Fleet, vaporized. The effect was instantaneous. The remaining ships of the Southern Patrol fell into disarray. Their command and control was gone. Some continued on their original course, others stopped dead, and a few began firing erratically. They were no longer a fleet, they were a confused mob. "Now," Leo ordered, "before they recover, hit them hard. Cripple, don't kill. We need to salvage their wrecks for resources. We're not just winning a battle, we're resupplying for the next one." For the next 18 hours, they turned the sector into their personal hunting ground. Leo's strategies grew bolder, more unpredictable. He used the wrecks of enemy ships as improvised minefields. He had Lumina broadcast fake distress signals on compact frequencies, luring patrol groups into ambushes. He had Xylos lead boarding parties in brutal, close-quarters assaults on crippled enemy vessels to capture their energy cores. He was turning the AI's assets against it, fighting a war of attrition where he held none of the initial advantages. He was teaching the alien AI a very old, very human lesson. War is not a duel. It is a back-alley brawl where the only rule is to be the one who walks away. The tide of the simulation turned. Their score, once deep in the negative, began to climb. They were still outnumbered and outgunned, but they were outthinking their opponent at every turn. On the bridge, the dynamic had been permanently altered. Leo was the undisputed strategist. Lumina was his intelligence officer, her incredible processing power now dedicated to running predictive models on his wild, asymmetric tactics. Xylos was his enforcer, the brutal hammer that Leo wielded with precision and devastating effect. They worked together with a seamless efficiency that bordered on telepathic. With 12 hours left in the simulation, they faced their final problem. The AI, having lost nearly half its fleet to these guerrilla tactics, had changed its own strategy. It consolidated all its remaining ships into one massive death fleet and began a slow, methodical purge of the sector, heading directly for the terraformed moon. It was abandoning tactics for overwhelming brute force. "It's learned," Lumina projected, a note of awe in her voice. "It has assessed our tactics as unpredictable and has concluded that seeking a direct engagement is the only way to negate our strategic advantage. It's forcing a final confrontation. We can't win a straight fight," Xylos rumbled, stating the obvious. The enemy fleet still had twice their numbers and 3 times their firepower. "No, we can't," Leo agreed. He was looking at the main display, at the moon they had used as their sanctuary. "So we won't give them one." He zoomed in on the moon's topographical map, highlighting the primary terraforming regulator, a massive fusion-powered atmospheric processor located at the planet's north pole. "We've been fighting for territory," Leo said. "It's time to change the battlefield itself. Lumina, calculate the overload parameters for the atmospheric regulator's core. I want to know exactly how much energy it would take to make it go critical." Lumina's form flickered. "That is, a planetary-scale weapon. The resulting explosion would sterilize the entire moon and everything in orbit around it. It is a scorched earth tactic. It is forbidden by every article of the Galactic Compact War Accords." "The AI isn't a member of the Compact," Leo said coldly. "And this is a simulation. Xylos, I need you to take our last destroyer, rig its reactor to overload, and pilot it directly into the regulator. The rest of us will engage the enemy fleet, pull them into a low orbit over the pole, and hold them there until the trap is sprung." Silence descended on the bridge. This was beyond unorthodox. It was monstrous. It was a strategy that did not seek to defeat the enemy, but to annihilate them in a shared suicide. Xylos looked from the tactical map to Leo, his golden eyes searching the human's face. He saw no malice, no bloodlust. He saw only a terrifying, icy resolve. This was what it took to win when survival was the only objective. He was finally beginning to understand. "I will pilot the destroyer myself," the Cathar said, his voice a low rumble of finality. It was a warrior's death, a worthy end. "No," Leo said, shaking his head. "You're the best combat pilot we have. I need you here leading the fleet, keeping the enemy pinned down. You need to make them believe we're making our last stand. I'll pilot the destroyer." "You," Xylos's disbelief was plain. "You are not a pilot." "I don't have to be," Leo replied. "I just have to fly in a straight line." He looked at them both, the brute and the brain who had once scorned him. "It's been an honor serving with you." The final battle was a ballet of desperation and fire. Led by Xylos, the tiny fleet met the AI's armada in the skies above the moon's pole. The Aegis weaved and dodged, its weapons firing continuously, taking hit after hit but always managing to stay in the fight. Xylos was a demon at the helm, pushing the ship beyond its limits. Lumina, meanwhile, was engaged in a furious cyber war, throwing up ghost signals and sensor decoys to confuse the enemy fleet and buy Leo more time. Leo, alone on the bridge of the destroyer Retribution, pushed the throttle to maximum. His course was set. The atmospheric regulator grew from a speck to a vast, complex structure on his view screen. Alarms screamed around him as enemy fire began to find its mark. The ship shuddered, a console exploded in a shower of sparks, but he held the course. In the final moments, he opened a comms channel back to the Aegis. They're all in position. Tell Kalen we did what was necessary. Then he hit the switch that overloaded the reactor and closed his eyes. The simulation ended. Leo gasped, the neural interface retracting from the back of his neck. He was back in the sterile white pod, his heart hammering against his ribs. The smell of ozone was thick in the air. The pod's hatch hissed open, revealing the dimmed lights of the observation chamber. He stumbled out, his legs unsteady. Xylos and Lumina were already outside their own pods, standing motionless. The chamber was filled with other cadets and instructors, all of them staring at the main screen, which was replaying the final moments of the simulation. The small destroyer vanishing into the heart of the regulator, followed by a wave of pure energy that erased the entire moon and the enemy fleet from existence. The final score for Squad 7 was displayed in bright, victorious numbers. They hadn't just survived, they had won. A profound silence held the room captive. No one was cheering. The other cadets looked at Leo not with admiration but with a mixture of awe and fear. They had just watched a display of strategic thinking so alien, so utterly ruthless, that it defied their understanding of conflict. Instructor Kalen walked toward them, his ancient face grim. He stopped before Leo. "Cadet Vance," he said, his soft voice cutting through the silence, "explain your final strategy." Leo straightened up, his exhaustion suddenly immense. "The objective was to defend the sector and survive," he said, his voice hoarse. "The AI's final move made a conventional victory impossible. By destroying the primary strategic asset, the moon, I denied it to the enemy and eliminated their forces in the process. It was the only logical path to mission success." "Logical," Kalen repeated, the word hanging in the air. "You sacrificed your own life, your ship, and an entire world to win." "It was a simulation, sir," Leo replied. "The lives and the world weren't real. The victory was." Kalen turned to address the entire class. "For centuries, the Galactic Compact has wondered why humanity was placed under the Great Prohibition, why a species of such apparent fragility was barred from participating in interstellar conflict. Many of you in your arrogance assumed it was because they were weak. Today, you have seen the truth." He gestured to the main screen, which now flickered with new images. They were not from the simulation. They were archival records from Earth's distant past. Grainy, black-and-white footage of trench warfare. Cities turned to rubble by aerial bombing. The horrifying, blinding flash of a mushroom cloud. A history written in blood and fire. "The other species of this galaxy perfected war as a tool of statecraft," Kalen explained, his voice resonating with ancient sorrow. "With rules, with honor, with limits. A Cathar seeks a glorious death in battle. A Glypton seeks a mathematically perfect victory. But humans," he looked at Leo, "humans don't seek anything in war except its end. They do not fight to defeat an army. They fight to destroy their enemy's capacity to ever wage war again. They escalate. They innovate. They turn rocks into weapons, ships into bombs, and planets into funeral pyres. They embrace a concept that we find utterly abhorrent: total war." The room was silent as a tomb. The alien cadets stared at the images of Earth's self-inflicted savagery, and then at the quiet, unassuming human standing in their midst. They were finally beginning to understand the monster that lived behind his deceptively soft eyes. "The Great Prohibition was not enacted to protect humanity from the galaxy," Kalen concluded, his voice barely a whisper. "It was enacted to protect the galaxy from humanity. Your capacity for strategic ruthlessness is a plague we dare not unleash. Cadet Vance has shown us all why." He turned back to Leo. "You have passed the crucible, but you have also confirmed our deepest fears." Later, in the mess hall, Leo sat at his usual table expecting to be alone. But this time, two figures approached. Xylos, moving with a new, hesitant respect, placed his food tray on the table. Lumina drifted to a stop beside him, her light soft and questioning. "Human," Xylos began, the word no longer an insult. "The things you did in the simulation, the deception, the sacrifice, is that how your people truly think in times of war?" Leo looked up at the hulking Cathar and the brilliant Glypton. He saw genuine curiosity in their eyes, the first he had ever witnessed. "We hope we never have to think that way again," Leo said quietly. "But we don't forget how. War is a part of us, a terrible, horrible part. We learned a long time ago that the only thing worse than fighting a total war is losing one. Lumina pulsed gently. Your mind, it does not operate on predictable lines. It is chaotic, yet terrifyingly effective. I wish to understand it. It wasn't friendship, not yet. It was the wary respect one predator gives to another, more dangerous one. But it was a beginning. Leo was no longer the Academy's joke. He was its ghost, a living reminder of a power so immense the galaxy had decided it was better left sleeping. He looked at his new, unlikely companions and knew his isolation was finally over. But he also knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that his people's long quarantine was far from finished. The galaxy now knew what a single human could do. It would be a long time before it was ready for more.